The mysterious Flight 115. Background: on a routine transatlantic journey from London to New York, American Airlines Flight 115, a Boeing 777 carrying 268 passengers, took off on what seemed like a normal flight. The weather was clear, the crew was experienced, and the passengers settled into their seats, expecting a smooth crossing over the Atlantic. Mid-flight anomaly: halfway across the Atlantic, the crew began experiencing unusual technical difficulties. Flight 115's instruments started malfunctioning, one by one. The navigation system flickered, communication with air traffic control became sporadic, and both pilots noticed the autopilot system disengaging without reason. Attempts to troubleshoot the issue proved futile. Disturbing reports: passengers in the cabin began noticing strange phenomena. Cell phones picked up strange signals, and some reported hearing odd, almost metallic sounds reverberating throughout the fuselage. Flight attendants tried to calm everyone down, but even they started noticing something off. The plane suddenly hit turbulence in otherwise calm skies, sending drinks and food trays flying. Unidentified object: as the plane descended through the night sky, both pilots spotted an object in the distance, hovering near their flight path. It appeared to be an unidentified aircraft or drone-like object, emitting a pulsating glow. The object seemed to be tracking their movement, matching their speed. The pilots tried contacting nearby aircraft and air traffic control, but all signals went dark. Emergency descent: deciding they needed to land as soon as possible, the crew declared an emergency. Flight 115 began its descent towards an alternate landing site in Reykjavik, Iceland. As they descended, the strange object continued to follow, making abrupt movements and emitting a high-pitched frequency that interfered with the plane's systems. Final minutes: just as the plane was about to land, the object vanished into the dark night sky. The systems on board mysteriously returned to normal, and the plane landed safely in Reykjavik. The passengers and crew were shaken, but no one could explain what had occurred. Aftermath investigations into the incident yielded no conclusive evidence. The radar showed no other aircraft in the vicinity at the time of the encounter, and the plane's systems were found to be in working order. No one could explain the unidentified object or the technical malfunctions that occurred on Flight 115. It remains an unsolved mystery in aviation history. The routine departure. On an unusually calm evening, American Airlines Flight 115 prepared for takeoff from London Heathrow Airport, bound for New York's JFK International. The Boeing 777-300ER, a state-of-the-art aircraft, gleamed on the tarmac as passengers boarded, their thoughts filled with work, family, or the prospect of a new adventure in the United States. The seasoned Captain Richard Matthews and his first officer Amelia Carter completed their pre-flight checks with precision. Both were veterans of the skies with thousands of flight hours between them. Everything about the flight seemed routine: no signs of mechanical issues, no bad weather on the radar, and air traffic control reported clear skies all the way to the Atlantic crossing. As the plane lifted off the ground, passengers settled in. The seatbelt sign blinked off, and the comforting hum of the engines reassured them that this would be a smooth, uneventful flight. Flight attendants began serving drinks and meals, and the plane settled into cruise mode at 35,000 feet. But this sense of calm would not last long. The first signs of trouble. 4 hours into the flight, while somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean, the first unusual event occurred. Captain Matthews noticed a flicker on his cockpit display, a brief but noticeable glitch in the autopilot system. He frowned but didn't think much of it at first. Minor bugs sometimes happen. First Officer Carter confirmed that everything was functioning normally. Yet, not more than 10 minutes later, another flicker. This time, the navigation system also briefly went offline before rebooting itself. Matthews and Carter exchanged glances. Something was wrong. They attempted to reach air traffic control ATC to report the issues, but their radios crackled with static. The cockpit filled with the unnerving sound of garbled transmissions before the signal went completely silent. At that moment, the plane jolted violently as if it had hit sudden turbulence, but the radar showed clear skies for miles around. The passengers, jolted awake from sleep or relaxation, were startled. Oxygen masks dropped momentarily from the overhead panels before retracting again. panic began to spread. The captain made a PA announcement, attempting to reassure the passengers that the turbulence was only temporary, but even he wasn't sure what they were dealing with. The unseen presence. Flight 115 was now flying on manual control. Both Matthews and Carter struggled to regain control of the erratic instruments. As they fought to stabilize the aircraft, Carter gasped, her eyes wide as she pointed out of the cockpit window. Just ahead, barely visible against the blackness of the night sky, was a distant glow. At first it seemed like a reflection or a trick of the eye, but as the plane neared, the light became more distinct. Hovering in the sky, a few miles away, was an object unlike anything they had ever seen. It was spherical, metallic, and pulsating with a faint, eerie blue light. The object moved with astonishing speed and agility, seemingly tracking their plane as it continued its flight path across the Atlantic. "What the hell is that?" Matthews muttered under his breath. The object remained distant, but it was clear that it was following them. Every time the pilots adjusted the course, the glowing orb would mimic their movement, never closing the gap, but never retreating either. Passenger reactions. Back in the cabin, strange occurrences began to multiply. Several passengers reported hearing faint, high-pitched frequencies through their noise-canceling headphones. Others noticed their phones, which should have had no signal over the middle of the Atlantic, briefly picking up garbled transmissions. Some of these passengers later claimed they received cryptic text messages filled with jumbled symbols and numbers, which disappeared moments later. Flight attendants, noticing the growing anxiety among the passengers, moved quickly to reassure them, but they too were unnerved. The air felt different, thick, oppressive, and some felt an inexplicable sense of dread, as though they were being watched. The strange metallic sounds reverberating through the fuselage became louder. The lights flickered overhead, and the hum of the plane's engines changed in pitch, becoming more uneven. Then, as if to intensify the fear, the plane suddenly lurched again, descending without warning. The passengers screamed as the fasten seatbelt sign blinked on, and the overhead luggage compartments rattled. For a few horrifying moments, the Boeing 777 seemed to free fall before Matthews managed to stabilize it again. Emergency descent. Captain Matthews had seen enough. He instructed First Officer Carter to declare an emergency and prepare for an immediate descent. Their destination: the nearest available airport, Keflavik International Airport in Reykjavik, Iceland. But just as Carter attempted to relay their emergency status to a TC, the object outside accelerated, closing in on them. For a few heart-stopping seconds, the sphere hovered directly alongside the aircraft. The bright blue glow filled the cockpit, bathing the pilots in its ethereal light. It was as though time itself slowed down. The cockpit instruments flickered wildly, the altimeter spinning erratically. "I have no control," Carter shouted, her hands gripping the yoke tightly. Then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the object sped off, vanishing into the night sky in a blur. At that precise moment, the plane's systems returned to normal. Communications with the TC were restored, the navigation system stabilized, and the controls became responsive again. Shaken but determined, Captain Matthews began the descent into Reykjavik, their new emergency destination. The safe landing and the investigation. Flight 115 made its emergency landing in Reykjavik without further incident. As the plane taxied to the gate, the passengers, still in shock, remained silent. No one spoke as they disembarked, their faces pale with fear and confusion. In the days that followed, investigators from multiple agencies including the FAA, American Airlines, and even representatives from the military examined the aircraft and interviewed the crew and passengers. Yet, no explanation could be found. The plane's systems appeared to be in perfect working order, with no evidence of malfunctions or tampering. There was no radar trace of the mysterious object, and the brief communications blackout remained unexplained. Passengers' reports of receiving strange signals or hearing odd frequencies could not be corroborated, as their devices showed no record of such occurrences. To this day, the incident remains classified as unexplained, and Flight 115 has become the subject of countless conspiracy theories, from extraterrestrial encounters to top-secret military experiments. The passengers and crew, though grateful to have survived, would never forget the strange events that unfolded in the skies over the Atlantic that fateful night. Epilogue: the continuing mystery. Years later, some of the passengers from Flight 115 have come forward with new, chilling details. Some claim to have recurring dreams of the glowing object, seeing it again in their sleep as it follows them through endless skies. Others report feeling watched, as though the presence from that night never truly left them. Captain Matthews and First Officer Carter, though retired, still occasionally speak about the incident. They, too, have no answers. But one thing is certain: they both agree that what they encountered that night was not of this world. American Airlines has since quietly retired Flight 115 from service, as the mystery surrounding that night continues to haunt those who were there.